Excited to introduce you to our past president, Jim Fortner. He groomed me for this, and I'm so gracious for his continued help and support.
And she said it all right there. Thanks for everybody coming today. You know, nice to see people out here in person, and hopefully these events become more the norm as we go forward. And I'm going to introduce Nabil here as our president-elect.
Hi everyone.
Your last name, Nabil?
Nabil Buasaba.
Buasaba.
Say again.
Buasaba.
That's it.
I learned that the first night.
Nice to meet you all. It's great to be here. And as Jim said, we hope to, to keep meeting in person on a regular basis and reach out if you have any questions. And we're glad to be together today.
And Nabil will be your president next year, so I'm grooming him this year for that. And here is Renee. She is our VP of Operations, and she is not allowed to quit, ever.
Okay, I just learned that when you learned that. My name is Renee Lawless. I'm the VP of Operations. I help support the chapter with any of the technology and operational processes. Would love volunteers if you want to help keep us efficient, because our volunteer board does change every 2 years, so it's very important that from the member standpoint, that our technology and our processes stay consistent for you guys. If you have any ideas for things that we could do, let me know.
Hello, I'm Anthony Register. Call me Tony. Since we have a Tony, I have to be Anthony. So either one works, or hey you. I'm the VP Professional Development. Been doing this part for about a year and a half. We really kind of grew into that from coaching conversations. We've been to that event for about 5 years and bringing coaches together for CCEUs about topics. It's about a facilitation of a conversation, not a presentation per se. And that kind of led me to where I'm at today. I have a passion for it. I really enjoy having these conversations with the coaches and learning things and bringing people from within and from without, creating events. If you see them on the site, the different opportunities and topics that we have. Sometimes they're at lunch, sometimes they're at night. It just depends. Just take a look at that. Love to get your input, because it's not about me and my topics. I want to hear what you guys want to learn about. Or maybe one last thing I'll share is the first time I did this, there's a topic I knew nothing about, so I made some notes and I presented it, asked questions, and they taught me and had no idea. So it was really cool when it started to learn about what we're trying to do and meet people. So anyways, what point being is, or more always, is that you don't have to know the topic. It's a great opportunity to bring a topic to this. We can find the right people, or you can be that person who will bring people together and learn from that. So I think that's all I have to share. I have a lot to say sometimes, even though I'm an introverted extrovert or something, extroverted introvert, whatever. But anyways, with that, here you go, Tony.
Thank you. I'm Tom Killen. I lead our community outreach, and I'm going to take like 15 seconds to plug our next event, which is on May 12th at the Chamber of Commerce. It's actually, the location is going to be Junior Achievement, but it's with the Chamber of Commerce. We'd love to have everybody there. It's going to be a speed coaching event. More details can be found on our website or also on the Chamber's website. So if you haven't registered already, we'd love to have you.
Alex is our VP of Marketing Communications. She likes me to switch it to Communications and Marketing. I forget every time.
It's because my background is in communications. My communications team and I write all of the emails that you receive. We corral other folks to write contributions to those emails, and we are in the process of publicizing the ICW event on May 12th. We do a monthly newsletter. It now comes out, as of this month, it comes out on the 1st of every month. It had been publishing the first Monday and third Monday, and we're going to the first day of the month, and we're going to use that time to do more work on social media. So look for social media in all the usual places, and we hope you'll amplify, respond, comment, participate in the discussion. My communications team, it consists of me and Michelle Stills from the Western Carolina Coaches subchapter, and we're looking for more people to help us communicate with everyone else in the chapter. So it's good to meet you. Hope to talk with you today.
If you are looking to make connections with coaches and network, this is the place to be. And I'm really glad that you're here. I'd like to know how many of you are new. This is your first time coming to an ICF Charlotte event. Thank you. That's wonderful. Congratulations for being here. Welcome. Come on in. I do want to tell you that each of our VPs has a committee that works with them and helps them plan things. Some of the jobs are very small, like one time folks may be working with Tom on ICW, and then somebody else might be working with him on some other outreach events. So if you are even thinking or considering jumping in and being a part of this group, a committee is a great way to step in and determine what your role, you determine what your role is on that committee, but we would love to have you. This is our first in-person quarterly connections meeting, and I have planned for them to be around diversity and coaching. And Jaslyn Roberts and June Carter stepped up to lead this first one. We are challenged by ICF Global to move the needle forward in diversity in our leadership, in our membership, and in our programming. So part of our strategic plan is to look at how we can increase diversity amongst our members and our board and all that we do in our leadership and programming. So I was excited to share with you this first event, and if you have ideas about diversity and coaching that you would like to share, we're going to have another quarterly meeting in August and in November. And it will be here. CBI is great. They let us have this space free. And we are so grateful to them for sharing such a great space with wonderful technology and facilities. The restrooms are at the back, and we have plenty of sandwiches. I want to thank Renee for getting the sandwiches together from Jimmy John's. She picked them up. And then we've got some cookies and chips and water, and I think there's some soda and coffee. And my cup probably is still in the coffee pot. So do you have any questions about what we're doing here today before we get started? Anthony has agreed to video this, and we're going to put it on our YouTube channel. And so we would really like your input. So stop by the board and share what your thoughts are for us so that we can meet your needs as coaches. So thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce June Carter and Jaslyn Roberts, and they both do work in Charlotte with the DEIB or DEI. They're trained. There is an inventory that if you're interested in this assessment or inventory, intercultural diversity, put your name in that plastic pitcher back there, and we're going to draw for a free one for you to use, and I'll let them explain that a little bit more. But anybody in here that's on my Diversity Advisory Council, would you stand up? Thank you. Esther Wong, Karen Ross Johnson, and Jaslyn Roberts are working with me to help me this year to move the needle on diversity in our chapter. I can't do this by myself, and they volunteered their time to help me with that. And this is how we got this event going, was from the Diversity Council and jumping in and saying, yes, let's do this. So I'm going to turn it over to you two, okay?
All right, so I'm going to use the microphone as a backup, as I tend to wander. And if you can't hear me, I will anchor myself better with the microphone. Is that fair? Turn that off. Okay. Can you hear me? Reasonably well? So we are really excited to be here. Jaslyn and I have worked together over 20 years. In lots of different capacities. We'll say a little bit more about that. Both of us came from a background in leadership development and in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consulting. We became coaches. We saw how integrated and important that work was. And we've had a real focus on how do we help other coaches understand where some of our blind spots are. So what we would say to you is, as we start this conversation, we are not likely to be going super deep. We're going to be at the surface and sharing a number of things. Hopefully we will increase some awareness. We will leave you probably with more questions. And that's okay. We also have resources that we will share with you. These are, in many ways, excerpts from a 2-day leadership development workshop that we do specifically for those who are leading in culture change around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So that's part of the reason why you might imagine the surface. And that's our foundational program. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that goes beyond that. So the intercultural competence coaching that we are raffling away, we'll say more about at the end as well, but if you don't have your name in there, it is, you get to complete an assessment. There's a continuum that helps you understand generally where you are in terms of how you engage and navigate differences. And then there's 2 one-hour coaching sessions with a certified coach who's also certified in this particular instrument to help you understand what that is telling you about where you are on the continuum and help you craft an individual development plan for what are some next steps for you. So it's one of our more popular options, and we thought you might appreciate that opportunity. So that's what that is. You don't have your name in there. All right, so a bit about us. We are part of Tango Leadership. I'm the CEO and founder of Tango Leadership. I founded it 2 years ago, and I reached out to folks like Jaslyn and said, there's no way I'm doing this work alone. How do we collaborate? What could this look like? And so I'm just thrilled to be with you in this space. Thank you. You can see we've got some deep love. Forgive us if we have moon eyes every once in a while. This is a relationship we have invested in and continue to invest in. So what I mean by that is through the years, we have had very difficult conversations about the differences that we have from each other, how that shows up when we are co-leading or co-facilitating, what might I be doing consciously or unconsciously that might undermine Jaslyn instead of supporting her, and vice versa, right? We're giving and receiving feedback, exploring differences that we have that are in common. So what is it like to go through the world as women and try to influence in corporate environments? Whatever the topics. So we've been peer learners for a long time.
Continue to be students, and we continue to be students, because in this world of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we started off with diversity and inclusion. Then we went to diversity, inclusion, and equity. Then we went to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. And we know that there's going to continue to be evolutions. And so that's why we consider ourselves students, because when we think we've gotten pretty good in a certain area, something happens, and then all of a sudden we've got to start or continue learning again. So being a student is just like a lifelong thing for us.
Yeah. So some of you may have heard various places. Fail forward. Mm-hmm. We encourage failing forward continuously, and we do it a lot ourselves. So that is definitely one of those things in this space. All right. So part of what Tango Leadership is about, a huge part, is around developing leaders in the mindset that they are responsible for creating the world around them, right? So leaders tend to have a vision, they're trying to bring that vision to life, and it's through that process that they are creating it. How do they do that in a way that is inclusive, that leverages diversity as a strength? How do they do that with a sense of resilience and agility, given the transformational changes that we are going through at paces that are just off the chain? And so from an inclusive leadership awareness, I'm trying to not block slides, so forgive me if I am. We have 5 things that we anchor to. And what I love is when we're working with coaches or leaders, coaches in particular tend to have the tools and the skill sets and the willingness to step in to these inclusive leadership traits. Self-awareness and the willingness to dig deep and understand our own experiences in the world. How has that shaped our worldview? And as coaches, how does that then shape the questions we're willing to ask or not ask? What we're willing to explore with clients? cautiously and unconsciously. We want to raise the awareness so it's a more conscious decision than unconscious one. We also, of course, talk about a curious and open mindset. I have not met many coaches who do not have curious, open mindsets. It's one of the most beautiful things that coaches bring to the world. When we also think about cultural awareness and adaptability, it's having a sense of awareness of our own cultural norms, our own cultural practices, and they come from many different places, so we'll unpack it a little bit more in this conversation, and being willing to adapt. So an example, and we've got some resources that you might be interested in around this, right? Even how people think about public information and private information. There are some cultural differences. The orientation to time. How big is the past? How big is the present? How big is the future? How much do they overlap? Do they happen simultaneously or not? These are mindsets we're bringing into our coaching and our clients will bring in, and we may or may not be aware of some of those differences, and they do influence the result of how we're partnering together. Vulnerability is key. As we said, we will fail forward regularly, sometimes spectacularly. As a matter of fact, I'm sure I've already said something wrong, and will do so again before the end of this talk. And it's being willing to notice it, to apologize for the mistake if appropriate, to be curious about it, to learn. And then the visible commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Lots of ways to do it. And we'll give you a couple of examples of how we've incorporated it into Tango leadership. So not a surprise, right? We have to know our authentic selves to do this work properly, to be able to coach. So there's some common blind spots. You may have in the past said these to yourself, or thought them, or maybe not. Maybe you've heard them in our practice. I'm going to actually pop up one by one in case you can't see them. I only coach fill in the blank. So this isn't that important to me. So we might inadvertently be thinking, yeah, that I don't have clients that fall in those identity groups. I don't have to worry about it. Let's focus on what we have in common. As we're doing introductions or as we're having conversations, humans do that. We're looking for groupness. We're looking for a sense of belonging. We often go to commonality, and we need to catch ourselves. Asking powerful questions will avoid introducing bias. Which powerful questions are we asking? There are whole sets of powerful questions I have caught myself rarely asking. So we should inspect that. We'll play with that a little more. I treat all my clients the same. Or, the other way, I engage each of my clients as an individual. Yes, and there's more to us than just the individual, right? I walked into this room and I said, I'm June Carter. You don't know who that is? Not really. It takes a while to get to know June Carter. Our brains are wired to immediately see some visible clues and start making up stories about what June Carter is probably about. And that happens with our clients as well. We have to catch ourselves. I don't see color. All women share this experience. Often with good intent, we will say, I don't see color, like meaning it's not important to me. And we have just unseen someone. Because the world doesn't not see color, right? And all women share this experience, or all gay people have had this experience, or whatever group. That's not true. There tend to be patterns. We can make generalizations. Of course, we don't want to move to stereotype. That's stereotype. Avoid glossing over uncomfortable topics. So we just go, ooh, I don't know how to address this, so I'm just going to step over it. And we've all done it, but paying attention to that. What else? Did I just
Telling people to bring their full selves.
Yeah, not allowing exit. Thank you. This is why we work in pairs. Good. So I got it back. I love this one. Okay. Not allowing people to bring their full selves to the relationship, right? That invalidating, I don't see color, or I'm treating them. And not acknowledging that there's all these other components. And then finally, assuming we understand based on our own experiences, so we don't unpack further. When do we stop getting curious with the client? Because it seems so familiar that we think we can fill in the rest. So, any of those sound familiar? Heard them in our practice?
Good hour. Thank you. So, as we go through this today, just keep thinking about how do we show up with our clients? How do we select our clients? Are there any biases we have? Just like in one of the pop-ups, I only work with women. And so one of the things that happened when all the protests were happening around the world with George Floyd's killing, we started getting calls from coaches because they knew we were also diversity practitioners, and the coaches were saying, I'm working with clients, they're asking me questions and I don't really know how to address it. I may not have the competence in addressing diversity, equity, inclusion with our clients. So we've been having conversations with other coaches around how we do this work. But as I said earlier, there is so much more to this work, and there's so much more that we continue to learn. So, we don't have a lot of, long period of time today, and as June said, we're probably going to be a little bit more above the surface, and you leave being a little bit more curious. And so our outcomes today, we often ask, how do you define diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And you might hear something different, from different people. And so we want to introduce you to this framework that drives change at multiple levels, because it is a change. It's a change system. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a change. It's a change methodology. It's a change system. To be able to increase awareness of our own group memberships, and then also pose you some questions that will help you reflect. And again, we will leave you with some additional resources for continued learning, and then also some questions so that you can spend a little bit more time reflecting on your own. So how we work together, and as we look at, sometimes we call them operating agreements. Think about these in the context of how you work with your clients, or what may be happening with your clients. So speaking your truth from the I, when we're coaching a client, they're talking about themselves. If I am sharing examples about me, I am talking about experiences that I have, because our life journeys are different. Our coaches, our coaching clients, their life journeys are different. And so it's important to be able to speak from our own truth. Also maintaining confidentiality falls into the ICF Code of Conduct, ethical guidelines. They align, with what we're expected and how we're expected to be through ICF. Seeking to understand, and go back to thinking about asking those curious questions. Curious questions can be across differences, can be across, all the differences that we hold. Owning and managing our own judgments, and it's one of the things that we know that we all hold judgments. Often hear people say, I don't have any biases, I don't hold judgments, I treat everybody the same, I treat everybody equal, and I mean, it doesn't always mean fair, but we want to think we're good people. And so we want to think that we treat everyone, well, and that really is our goal. And then also expecting to experience discomfort. Think about the first time you coached a client, and I'm listening and I'm thinking, instead of paying attention to what hearing the client, I'm trying to think about what the next question I'm going to ask. We all did that when we first, came out of our coaching, coach training. And so slowing down that listening so that I can actually hear the client. So again, experiencing discomfort. And there's so much discomfort that comes in the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. One of the things that we hear oftentimes, I don't want to say the wrong thing, because I don't want to offend anybody. But we've got to start with ourselves first, understanding and owning our own differences, and then think about how we show up with our client and how we invite the client in to show up and be who they are. So we're going to let's define belonging, but we're going to start with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity, physical, psychological, physical, and societal difference, all the differences that we bring. Look at this room right here. This room represents what society really is like, right? So I bring so many differences into this world. I am female, I'm Black, I'm Caribbean. I was raised up north, but lived a portion of my life in the Caribbean. I sit in two cultures. I bring all of that with me. I'm single, I have siblings. So there are all these differences. All of these things are really important to who we are in our life's journey. So all of that comes with me and us everywhere we go. Inclusion. An individual or group can be and feels welcome and supported, valued, respected and valued. So when you bring somebody into the organization, what do you do to onboard them? Get them integrated into the system, want to make sure that they have everything that they need. What do you do when you work with a client for the first time? Pretty much the same thing. You want to make sure, that they feel like they can be who they are. Equity, fair treatment, access, and opportunity, a lack of barriers to access. One of the things that we talked about all the time. How do we remove those barriers, particularly around marginalized groups? So as your clients are coming to you, depending on, the group memberships that they bring, this is the work, because they're also going to be talking to you, if they haven't already, about experiences that they have in the work environment, about their feeling of being included. Do I have a seat at the table? Do I belong?
Jess, I want to out myself for a minute here too. One of the ways this popped up for me is when I had our website designed for the new business. I wasn't explicit to say it needed to be fully accessible. We are still trying to fix that. And that is so frustrating. Imagine. So there's an example of equity not built into a process, no ill intent, and needing to work to fix that.
Yeah.
So just
Exactly. Just think about, there's a visual that I know that everybody is going to a race and there's a bicycle that's given to everyone, but all the bicycles look the same. One guy's 6 feet tall, somebody is in a wheelchair. The other person's a very tiny person. They all got exactly the same. So it was equal, but it was not equitable for all of them. So you shift it, so the person who's in the wheelchair, they have a bicycle that they can use with their hands. And the shorter person gets a shorter little tricycle, and the tall person, gets one that fits them. This is how you balance it. It's thinking about all of the things that we need to ensure that is there so that everyone has equal access. And then belonging, security and support. Do I belong? Do I feel like I belong where I'm at? I have been in places where, I may have been invited in and I may have collaborated with folks, but I didn't feel like I belonged in that place. The comfort level was not there. And so just think about the places that you have been, no matter how accomplished you are, no matter how much experience you have, there is a time where all of us go somewhere and we feel like we don't belong. So one of the things that I'd like you to do as coaches to answer this question, how do we operate more inclusively across difference? And what we're going to ask you to do is pair up with someone and have a discussion about that. How do you operate more inclusively across difference as coaches? We're going to give you about 5 minutes to have a conversation.
Okay, Mario. Tony.
So, as coaches, this is a question: how do we operate more inclusively across different
one thought comes to mind to talk about it. Like invite dads, something that in my opinion I'm trying to do explicitly part of the conversation.
For me, I'm always asking questions. I'm about living in the gray. I like actually continuing to push myself, trying to learn more about background and people. I'm as interested in I work
it would be fun. I heard
the world. The way that they show up. And so I'm always willing to check my biases, but I also think with storytelling, great place to start. It's a place to get story, but also to a lot of this is like trying to get like seeing the story is like something that I've heard before. And then I work with companies too. So there's been more issues. White poverty right now, like the last month. Although that's a fictional book, I learned so much I didn't know, right? Constant learning.
I agree with you, Maria. That allows you you haven't been in a fight, but you and I was that's the reason they have
I love stories. Yeah, I'm gonna like the genes are just like more. I think there's not enough opportunities to.
and you know, and it was like, that's interesting, right?
Can't get
Alright, so I know these conversations seem like they're going really deep. Remember we said we're really going to be at the surface level, so you're going to leave with a whole lot more questions.
Okay, wrap up your conversation.
Yeah.
It's a group of coaches.
It's like, well, this is what happens.
Focus back on jazz.
Facilitator facilitates to facilitators, where coaches facilitate to coaches. It can be a little bit of a challenge. But anyway, I just wanted to get just a couple of pop-outs, just a few. See, this is deep. Okay, so mindfulness. And what I would also encourage you, if you're meeting each other for the first time, you want to deepen this conversation, now you have an opportunity to connect with each other and have more conversation. But I just wanted to get a couple of quick pop-outs. What did you talk about? In reference to that question, you know, how do we operate more inclusively across difference as coaches? What are some of the things that you all talked about? Yes, sir.
So we discussed having an open mind when you go into the conversation, but then also be willing to be uncomfortable, as y'all identified earlier, and go there when it may feel some discomfort, because when you can go there, it creates space to recognize the difference and then find the similarity.
Right, exactly. Because we often want to go to similarities first. You know, when somebody tells me I don't see you as black, I'm like, really? You know, I am. You know, so but I want you to recognize those differences because it's part of it's who I am, and it's part of my life's journey. So I'm okay with that. So good, thank you. Who else? Yes, Kim.
We talked about, Lynn does diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as her day job, and I do it as my second day job. But what we said is, even with that, it's about bringing intention to it, and intention to our practice, and intention around us. It's like, I know I'm black every day, all day, 24/7, but then I have friends that remind me every now and then, and so it's about bringing and not ignoring that, and actually bringing it into the conversation.
Right, exactly. And how powerful conversations you have, how powerful is the work that we do when we're able to recognize and appreciate those differences and actually embrace those differences. It makes our work just so much stronger and so much more powerful. Great, thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
We spoke a little bit about the growth mindset and just being intentional, right? To be curious so that you're constantly trying to learn. and recognizing that someone's single story is not all of who they are, so that you're embracing and you're being curious about learning.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely. Look at how we marry coaching and diversity, equity, inclusion together. We integrate them together. They're really not separate, you know? But again, it's about knowing about ourselves, and then how do we enter into those conversations with the people that we're coaching. Because we're building relationships, you know, whether it's around coaching or DEIB or DEIBJ. You know, it is all about creating those relationships. I'm going to switch over to June. You're up next.
Yeah. All right. Bear with a little bit more kind of sharing input, and then we're going to get you up and moving a little bit, just so you have a few minutes warning. All right. So one of the things that we know is that we often engage, again, at the individual level, right? I show up and I'm like, I'm June Carter. I know exactly who that is, hopefully most of the time anyway. And other folks don't necessarily know. But I'm going through the world with this lens that's really about how I think of myself, the experiences I know I've had, my background, and I will then start sharing all kinds of things. Now, I'll have my own biases, my own prejudices, my own worldviews, just based on that legacy of experiences. Right? Our brains are wired to be bias-making machines, so we need to be a little bit gentle with ourselves around this, because it is also a survival mechanism. Unfortunately, it also does us a disservice. So in coaching, often though, we're thinking about those one-on-one conversations, that one-on-one trust. How do we build that? How do we come together, right? It's really focused on that individual. Now, the other end that I do a lot of, and Jaslyn does as well, leadership coaching, executive coaching. This is true if you're in a nonprofit, a government, any organizations, to understand the context in which the client is operating. So this would even be true if you're a health coach and you're trying to help a client with nutrition, and you're helping them think about the context in which they operate. What are some of the family habits or traditions, the ways of doing things that could support this change or get in the way of the change that you're trying to achieve? How does the system support whatever you're trying to accomplish? And how might it get in the way? And how do you, client, navigate some of that? What are some of the unwritten rules, right? Trying to peel the onion back to uncover the blind spots. And I think most coaching, we're going beyond just what the individual is trying to do to think about how are they going to make this real in their world, right? So that's systems level thinking. The piece that we see is often missing, the bridge, is around understanding groups. So June Carter is also white, cisgender, heterosexual woman married to an African American man who was raised in the Northeast. I was, not him. Moved to the South. Right? I've spent 30 years in corporate. I was a former chief operating officer. I'm a coach, credentialed. I do all kinds. So there's all these groups that I am part of. Some of them I didn't ask for. I was just born into. I got the skin tone I got because I was born into it. No matter what I do, I can't change the skin tone. I try hard sometimes, right? Because the red comes like that. So it's just what happens. I didn't choose to be cisgender woman. It's what my genetics and my experience is. There are other groups, though, that I did choose to be part of. I chose to become a coach. I chose to become credentialed. I chose to come to Charlotte. So when I'm in Charlotte, I'm a Southerner. When I'm up north, when I'm up north, I'm a Southerner. When I'm in Charlotte, I'm a Yankee. It's very interesting dynamic. So now we're getting into bestowed. I didn't ask for either one of those labels. I didn't ask to be labeled Gen X. I was given that by researchers. Now there's some validity and some common group stuff. So at the group level, there are often shared experiences based on that cohort. We've got to be super careful to understand what's generalization and often shared experience, but not assume shared experience. None of us represent our entire group. Right? I'm getting some nods. I'll tell you, particularly people of color and African Americans will say, I do not represent all black people. Right? There's a whole, and there's so much complexity in that community. The same with Latinos or Latinx. There's so much richness. And if they were born in another country, say in South America, even what race and ethnicity means in their country, they come to the US and they get a new set of boxes. Make sure you check the right box. But I haven't changed, but my context has. And there's implication for this. That's the insider-outsider group dynamics. It could be the normalized and marginalized groups. Sometimes it's called dominant and subordinated. We use in and out quite a bit, insider, outsider. So the insider group, whether they ask for it or not, and sometimes we do, get privileges, things are a little bit easier. In those outsider groups, things tend not to be made for us. They're just a little bit harder. I'm right-handed, there's an awful lot of things that are super easy for me. I don't have to think about it when I'm turning doorknobs or turning the ignition in a car, or where I sit at the table, or whether the scissors are gonna work. I mean, there's a ton of things, right? But for left-handed folks, it's not so easy. And that is true for all of us. So we have this mix, this beautiful mosaic of places where we do carry privilege and places where we don't. All of us have a mix. So we're going to unpack this a little bit more. I do want to point out, I mentioned biases and prejudices at the individual level. At the group level, it tends to show up as stereotypes and discrimination or patterns of privilege. At the systems level, that's where the isms live. Racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, ageism, heterosexism, et cetera, et cetera. Because they're systemic and embedded in the policies, practices, and ways of operating. So as coaches, we need to be agile, navigating all of these at the same time, because all of them are happening simultaneously with our clients and with us. So we're in the dance. All right, so I'm getting some nods. There are a lot of folks going, yeah, we follow you. Okay. Yeah. Liz Barris, there we go.
So how do we equate this with sociology? Like I'm thinking right now, I used to have a lecturer who told me that he or she doesn't understand who started for girls to wear pink and guys to wear blue. How did that start?
Right.
Yeah, who made that decision?
Right.
So and so it's, how does this affect our sociological beliefs and thoughts?
Well, that is a whole series of questions, right? So there's some really good, important stuff.
Can you, I don't think everyone heard the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So when we think about it, even in a sociological, and tell me if I don't get this wrong, or you can project, we can give you the microphone. You want to re-say it if you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, and if I miss it, you correct me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So when we think about sociology, like how does some of the stereotypes and the things that are now true, for example, girls wear pink and boys wear blue, where does that come from and what is the implication and the legacy of that? Like where did that start? Where did that come from? And there are whole fields of study that look at some of that. Without getting too deep into it, right? Different cultures, particularly when they colonized, brought their traditions. And European cultures, and there was an anthropologist, I'm trying to think of his name, he spoke, oh my gosh, it was a little long ago, conference. I'll think of it and I'll try to send it out to the group, who did some studies around some of the patterns, even around communication styles and where they came from and how different they were, say, from many of the African groups. And European groups had one set of traditions where women were marginalized because they stayed home and they did the farming and they did, and then also got labeled as witches because they figured out how to use herbs to heal. And the men had to go out and hunt. Right, so places that were colonized by Europeans tend to have some of those gender dynamics. If there was that kind of thing from Africa, it was a very different pattern. Women had more equal power, often dominant power, in societal structures. In Asia, there were some other patterns, and some of it he tied to climate and how hunter-gathering mix happened. Fascinating. So it goes deep.
Yeah.
I said that's a whole other thing. Thank you for asking that question. Anything you would add to what I said? I don't want us to go too far off trail. That's a brilliant question.
Well, the questions are always good.
I know. All right, we're going to get into an activity that gets you moving in just a minute. So, we talked about, I'm going to back up. I want to make sure you have angle on these slides. Of course, now I probably just blocked. All right. So Marilyn Logan actually is pretty well known in the diversity and inclusion space going back 80s, maybe 70s even, right? So this identity wheel you may have seen before, slightly different versions. It is a Maryland local version. And it helps us understand just a piece of the group identities we might hold. So in the core, kind of in that center section that looks yellow on the screen and turquoise on the slides, fascinating, are those that tend to be more innate identities, and they're pretty core to our identity. All right, so our gender, our age, it changes over time, but I mean our age, our race, our ethnicity, which does have some societal labels defining it. These are really core. Sexual orientation, right? And then we go to that middle ring, and they tend to be more groups that maybe were bestowed or chosen. So when we're thinking about it, our income. Now, as children, we didn't choose a level of income or privilege that we were born into. And that may change over time. So our membership in some of these groups can be fluid, particularly as we get into this middle ring, right? Or the nation we were born in, the religion. Right? I was born into an Irish Catholic family in Massachusetts. I do not practice Catholicism anymore. So it's changed over time, just examples. And then the outer ring, because we do a lot of work in companies and organizations, are some of those things that they may deal with in terms of pay, right, and level, and headquarters or not, and all that stuff. Make sense? So we all have identities around most of these group memberships and more. Some of those are in group, some of those are out group. Some we picked, some we did not. Some we got labeled. Here's the invitation. I'm going to ask you to stand up and carefully, without tripping the camera, we're going to stand in a circle. So if you're going to choose this area, just be super careful. Come on in. Come on. It's safe, I promise. Good. I'm going to stay away from the camera because I am dangerous. Okay. Come on in. We're going to close up a circle. If you want to leave, I'm not saying. Okay. So here's the way this activity will work. And listen carefully because there's several sets of instructions that I want to make sure. And I'm going to be checking with Jazz, make sure I don't miss anything. All right. So anyone in a moment, when I give the signal, can name a group identity that they hold. Now, here's how that plays. So for gender, I'm not going to say gender. All of us have one. Instead, I might say female or woman. Now, anyone who is a member of that group and wishes to own it in this moment would step in and join me. Everyone else, you just kind of stay standing. Notice what I said. You may choose to step in or not. We'll pause, just kind of look around and notice, and step back. And then someone else will call out a group. And we'll step in or step out. So you do not have to step in. There is no outing or dragging somebody with you. So it's not like, right?
Be
None of
careful,
that.
she just had surgery.
So it's like, don't do that, right? This is individual choice. Pay attention to what's happening in the room, but also what's happening in here. What feelings come up? What thoughts come up? What assumptions do we make? Just notice. Don't judge yourself. Don't let the inner critic take control of you and beat you down for it. Don't do that. Just notice. And I feel like there's one other that I was going to say. Oh, and if you can't hear or you are unclear on what was said, make your best interpretation. So if you couldn't hear it, simply say repeat. The person who called it repeats. The person who called it, not everybody. All right? Do not ask for an interpretation. Hear what was said, interpret for yourself, and make your choice. We can unpack it later because we'll have a short conversation. So we're not going to spend a lot of time. I mean, we could spend 40 minutes in this. We are not. We're going to spend about 7 minutes. So just notice the flow. Think we're good?
Good.
All right. So I will use my example and step in and say, women. Okay. And then step back. And
Well, I can follow with male.
Parent.
Single parent.
Repeat.
Single parent.
Healthcare professional.
Repeat.
Healthcare professional.
Got it native.
Jamaican?
It's getting funny, eh?
cancer survivor.
Career coach.
I love this one. Agile coach.
White.
Repeat?
White.
Agile coach.
Repeat?
Agile coaches.
Agile.
Yeah.
Born outside of the United States?
African.
Caregiver.
Millennial.
Boomer.
Athlete.
Married.
Divorce. No children.
Jealous.
Grandparent.
Former teacher.
Oh, wow.
First generation corporate America.
I'm going to stay. First generation college graduate.
What was that?
I was thinking, I think my dad did do something.
Let's get two more.
Trans family member.
International marriage.
All right. So are we okay to stay standing a few more minutes, or do you want to sit for debrief? What's your preference? Stand? Okay. Yeah, so what are some things you noticed during this activity?
There's so many commonalities.
So many commonalities? Okay, based on what?
Everything.
I mean, it's done everything.
I think I was the only one outliner here sometimes, but every other thing is kind of involved. You cannot take that away.
Okay, so part of what I'm doing is trying to get a little bit more precise even, not to challenge you. So most groups had at least one other person who joined.
Who joined, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there was at least someone else in the circle.
Yes.
Yeah. Not all, but.
Not all, yeah.
Many of our differences were unseen differences.
Yeah.
It wasn't something we could have picked up.
Yeah.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of women as parent, and then women of color when it went to single parent. I think there was one person who I'm not sure if they're women of color, but I don't think so.
I think for me, it was thinking about the uncomfortableness. I felt like if I was in the out crowd for certain things, but certain things not feeling uncomfortable for myself when I didn't have to stand up. So take a step forward. So I thought that was very interesting. Like, you know, and then sometimes like maybe even feeling guilty for being able to step forward as well.
So how many felt comfort or discomfort? Let me ask discomfort. I just question filed.
At least once.
Great modeling.
At least once.
Yeah, at least once. Yeah. And then how many felt guilty? That was another word I just heard.
I think for me, something that I realized as I was standing here is, you know, when I'm facilitating sessions or something like that, I'm willing to own straight white man in my communication. But here, you kind of urged me because I was hesitant to go white. And I don't know why. Like, I'm wrestling with why was that hard in this group to own that for some reason. So.
And it's interesting because we see that. So
Right.
not that we see you as white, but it is, in experiences that I've had, having someone to step in and say white, there's a level of uncomfortableness. And it often comes, what I have seen when somebody step in and say black or African American. And then it's followed up after that because it's like, do I say it or, or don't I say that? Yeah.
Wait till you're 62-year-old gray white man. First thing somebody asks you is about NASCAR.
Great example though, how we like identity pile.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a little curious about that in the sense that is it because it's making the unconscious privilege then present
That's a good question.
and articulated just with a word? I don't know if that's.
It's funny because that's a new phenomenon that I've recognized in maybe the last 8 to 10 years. I never felt that before this announcement of knowing the difference between white privilege. Before that, people would just say, but in the past maybe 8 to 10 years, I've noticed that shift of nervousness and come about.
So one of the things that's interesting, and I don't want us to go too off tangent, but I was thinking about how awareness tends to work, right? So we tend to start in unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. Ignorance is bliss, right? We just kind of go. And then there's this moment where all of a sudden we're beginning to see something we didn't see before. And we're like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it. So like there's this almost, I always think of it as the Jello wall. You almost need to like push through. And then to land in the beautiful place now of unconscious or conscious incompetence. Great. This is lovely. Now I know what I didn't know and I have no idea what to do with it. I feel guilty, I feel ashamed, I feel fearful. Believe it or not, that's movement towards change. And it's still awkward. And then we can begin to move, and we see it with our clients too, right? Into still very conscious, increased competence. How do we navigate the conversations? We take the risk and it works. We take the risk and it fails, but we talk through it, right? Ultimately, we again go into a place of unconscious or less conscious competence. And every identity can have that. Learning to drive a car has that. I mean, any kind of change. So I actually do think there is more awakening. And I'm catching myself going, I want to talk about woke. That's not what I'm talking about. That opens a whole different conversation. conversation, which I'm open to have at some point. But there is, as we shift then, to see it, oh, what do I do? And it does trigger our discomfort. For whites, so often we didn't realize we had a culture. I'm speaking for me and folks other white people have had conversations with. We didn't know. We're like, well, yeah, we're white, but, and other people of color could tell us, here's your patterns, here's your norms, here's how you do things. I mean, we've been accommodating your rules forever. We're going, I didn't even know. I mean, that's the, like a fish in water doesn't know it's in water until you take it out of the water, put it on the beach, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, where am I now, right? That's kind of part of what's happening. And then sometimes we just want to go back in the water, but the truth is we know there's something else out there. So it's never the same.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. All right, let's take seats. We'll keep moving because I want to honor.
But it's a really good segue into talking about privilege, because a lot of times when you mention the word privilege, people become very uncomfortable with it. But we do have privilege. We have earned and we have unearned privileges. And so sometimes they're subtle, and sometimes sometimes they're often seen. I happen to be heterosexual, so I can go about the world in this level of privilege. The world is made for people like me, but for my friends who are in, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, community, they may not necessarily be able to do the same things that I do. But then there's also this intersection because, you could be gay, lesbian, bisexual, let's just say male, white. White male is a privilege, but the sexual orientation is not considered to be a privilege. So sometimes we're teetering, in both. And, we can hold both. Both are present. All of us, we have some form of privilege in our group memberships. And then so it's so important for us as coaches, to think and understand and know what our blind spots are when we're working with our clients. Who do we prefer to have as a client? How do we connect with that person? Who is a client? What if they say something that I don't like? What if I have homophobia? And I'm a heterosexual coach and they say something, ooh, can I really, coach that person when I have these biases and these tapes that are inside of me? So I'm operating from a level of privilege of being heterosexual. And when I say that, I mean in the context of society, how I am seen, how we are seen. So those are very important. And so, when we look at privilege around tenure, access, who has access to, who has access to power and resources? When we look within society and we look at, who's leading the corporations, who's leading, society in our government system. It goes, it goes from the individual to the group to organizations and the bigger context of society, actually even the world, if we look at that. There's a level of comfort or maybe not. There's an ease, we've got positional power, so there are all of these things that come with privilege, but the important thing is that privilege is not bad, it's what we do with it. Do we use our privilege to remove barriers, for those who are, marginalized groups? So what I'd like to do is, if you would cue it up, June, we're going to show you a very short video that talks about privilege, and we think it's pretty powerful, but I think it's one of the best explanations that we have seen about privilege.
We've been engaged in a global conversation about race and racism. You've probably had discussions at home, at school, or at work, and in those conversations you've probably heard the term white privilege. You may have even had this term used in a way that felt like an insult or an accusation. Others will have told you that it's all just made up to make white people feel bad, and none of this is right. Privilege is a hard concept for people to understand because normally when we talk of privilege, we imagine immediate unearned riches and tangible benefits for anyone who has it. But white privilege, and indeed all privilege, is actually more about the absence of inconvenience, the absence of an impediment or challenge, and as such, when you have it, you really don't notice it. But when it's absent, it affects everything you do. There are lots of types of privilege out there. The privilege of being born into a wealthy family versus a poor family is kind of obvious, but then there's the privilege of being able-bodied versus having or acquiring a disability that most of us take for granted. I have two very close friends who are wheelchair users, and I'll be honest, when I first met them, I was completely ignorant about the everyday ways their lives are made harder through no fault of their own. Some of these ways are simply thoughtless, but some of them are just the way we live, just the way we build infrastructure, just the way everything works. That just makes their life harder than mine. That's just one of the ways that I'm privileged. And understanding that, embracing that, doesn't make me a bad person. But ignoring it raises the chance that my friends will be excluded in ways that are not obvious to me. And as their friend, I can't allow that. There's a good chance, as a white person watching this, your life is already hard. Every day you have to overcome some difficulty or challenge just to get by, but you can still have white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or you don't deserve the success you've had. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard or that you've never suffered. It simply means that your skin color has not been the cause of your hardship or suffering. There is nothing but a benefit to understanding our own privileges, white and otherwise. It brings us closer to those who are different. It helps us be vigilant about the ways we treat others different than us. It helps us make a society that is fairer and more equal. Having white privilege doesn't make your life easy, but understanding it can help you realize why some people's lives are harder than they should be.
Reactions to this short video?
Very well said.
And a different perspective, a broader, bigger perspective.
So it takes away that feeling of, thinking that privilege is bad, which it really is not. Again, it's what we do with the privilege. This is so one of the reasons, the other reasons that we wanted to do this was, just really to have a better understanding of intercultural competence. And again, if you have not put your business card or your name in the jar back there, we will be raffling off an assessment, an intercultural competence assessment, and you will get coaching, as a result of that. And as a matter of fact, I can't even see the.
Click again. Click again.
Oh, yeah, there you are. Yeah. So it's recognizing and understanding differences and adapting our own thinking and behavior. And again, think about as we're working with our clients and who we select, who we choose to work with as clients, to effectively interact with and or meet people across differences. We often hear the comment, the phrase about meeting people where they are. And it's like, what does that really mean? Do we truly do that? Especially if it comes with judgment and biases, and things like that. Do we really meet people where they are? This is about expanding our mindset. And some of these are coaching questions that you've used. Would it be okay if I asked you about? If you want to ask me about my culture, where I grew up, what my life has been like, it's okay to ask. Most people are okay with being asked these questions. Now, what I would also say is, so as a coach, you will know when you can ask those questions of your client, because it takes a while to kind of like build that relationship and build that trust with your client, but you will know when you can ask those questions. Would you mind if we discuss this a little bit further? So let's unpack it a little bit more. What reservations do you have about discussing this, with me? I want to meet you where you are. I also want to ensure that we have an opportunity to have those deep conversations that is going to help move the needle on whatever goals it is that you have set for yourself as a client. And then one experience that you have as a fill in the blank, as an African American, as Caribbean, as white, as a woman, as a gay, as a lesbian, as a transgender, that it may be impacting your perspective, because it does. It does. We take our life experiences into everything that we do. You saw the Loden's wheel. Think about the iceberg model. At the very top of that iceberg, you can see certain things. I'm black, I'm female. Today we don't, there's some things that we really don't know today, because then there's also transgender, but it's the things above the surface that we see, which also helps us, also can lead to some of the judgments that we hold. And then just think about what's below the surface. Tony, you said it. There are things that I would never even thought about in the exercise that we did. We would never know unless we reveal that, unless we stepped into the room. So there's that, there's all the stuff below the surface. And as we're working with our clients, we're digging and we're uncovering and we're learning more and more about the person so that we can coach them more effectively. And I think that you're up. All right.
What I'll do is fly through to the end so we can do our raffle, because that's the most important part.
Did everybody put their names in?
I've got some extra cards and a pen up there. If anybody didn't put their name in, take this opportunity real quick to do that.
Yeah, please do. All right. So, as coaches, some ways to think about this, some reflection questions. We love our reflection questions, and we will send these to you. What do you need to develop and grow your intercultural competence? That's part of why we're raffling away one of our programs. How narrowly have you defined your niche? And how might that serve you or limit you? How might you introduce yourself to demonstrate greater openness to working across differences? When I introduce myself to a client, I'll give them some of my group identities. I was born and raised in Massachusetts and moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. It's been really interesting to do that. I am a cisgender, heterosexual, white woman married to an African-American man. And so I bring some of those perspectives into our engagement. So you can actually do that. It begins to signal to clients it's okay for them to know their identities. What might you add to your working agreements that invite specific conversation about difference? What questions might you add to your repertoire, which we just touched on, and then what will you commit to doing differently? All right, what's the next step?
Real quick, Jim.
Yeah.
You told a really quick, really good short story about a client who selected you based on your recognizing the differences in group identity. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
I think this
Yeah.
would be a good story to tell.
Okay. So there was a woman who was looking for a mentor coach, and in particular, she wanted to, she was practicing her credential, or for her ICF credential renewal, but she also wanted to become more of an executive coach, so she wanted to move into that space. When I introduced myself, I shared some of those group identities, and she's a woman who, as I looked at her, I could tell she was a woman of color, but I didn't know her identities yet. And I said, as I work with my clients, I like to invite openness for us to talk about what we have in common, but also what's different. Because as I am coaching you and with you, I may have ideas when we're brainstorming that might work for me and not you. Or you may have experiences with clients that we don't know. So she came back to me. She did hire me as her coach. I was the only one white coach she interviewed. She interviewed 3 African-American coaches and as potential mentor coaches. And she said she came back and she selected me because I was the only one who overtly invited her to bring race into the conversation and that I would attend to that as a mentor. Very powerful. So I think that's the story that you're talking about. All right. I'm not going to go through this. This was a little bit about us and how in Tango we incorporate DEI into our work. And see, we've got a pretty diverse team. We list it as a core value. When we talk about our areas of expertise, we include neurodiversity, gender, women in leadership, race and ethnicity, etc. And then we have a number of offerings. That intercultural competence coaching is what we are about to draw now. So this is cool. Tony, are you willing to reach in there and find out who? And if you're interested, by the way, we have a workshop, again, you'll get the slides, in September, the 2-day that some of this is pulled from, will be happening again in September, so you'll get that information if you're interested. It's written very fancy, and I'm not sure, is that Karen or Kara? Mather?
Karen Mather.
Yeah. Karen Mather, okay.
I knew when I wrote it, I was like, they're never going to do it.
If you would add your email address to this, I will know exactly how to reach out to you to get that set up. All right. So thank you. Appreciate the conversation, appreciate your engagement.
One more.
And hopefully you walked away with a few nuggets. Yeah, I'm happy to share these slides. So I'll share them and then if you're going to read them out. Okay.
So these are, we've handed out a few things for you. One is, this is reflection questions. Just really give you an opportunity to sit with yourself and answer these reflective questions about your role as a coach. And then the second document that we provided you has a lot of really good resources on there. Did we bring me the books to show? Oh, I brought one, but I forgot to put it out. But anyway, this has
They're on the list though, right?
Yeah, they're on the list. Things that you can read, that you can watch, listen to, and then websites that you can go to. And this is, to develop your intercultural competence, more work around your journey in the space, as a coach in particular, but in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging. So you added justice.
Yeah, we have a J, but we're not dealing with the J yet, because I don't know how to do that. I'm gonna take some leadership from ICF on the J. But I want to thank you for and if you want more of this, share up here what you would like more of. And we're framing the next two around diversity and coaching. If there's a particular area that you would like to go deep in, or another surface view, I'd like to hear from you. What you think matters. Okay? Yep. Thank you for kicking us off. I do so appreciate it.
It was our pleasure. And there's some promotional material in the back. Please help yourself on the way out. Jude's business card is there. And then we also have some information about the 2-day experience that we will be delivering in September.
And take some food with you.
Yes.
So take a sandwich with you for the road. I appreciate it. And Jeremy, I want to see you.
Okay.
Oh. Thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate your engagement.